The Boston College coaching search is down to two candidates: Ohio State co offensive coordinator Bill O'Brien and Notre Dame defensive line coach Al Washington. Who's the favorite to get that job, and has it already been offered?
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Boston College's special episode, and today is brought to you by FanDuel. To make every moment more, now new customers can join today and get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. So it's now Thursday evening. I'm recording this with Pete Thamel on Alert on Twitter, along with BC Football. As today on Thursday, BC held their final two interviews. On last night's episode, I pondered who that second interview was, and I was a little bit surprised to find on Thursday morning that it was Al Washington was the big surprise, defensive line coach of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, and Bill O'Brien, which is the one I expected all along. We all knew, that Bill was going to get that final interview. So right now, where do things stand? This morning, both candidates had an interview. As of Thursday night, we don't know who has the job. Now, I believe that in the next 24 hours, we will find out who has the job. I feel, from what I've heard, it could happen while I'm recording this, that there will be an announcement. Now, if you remember the Jeff Hafley interview process back in 2019, Martin Jarman tweeted out the Gas and Hall GIF with smoke coming out of it to indicate that's when they had their hire. And Pete Thamel, I think, tweeted it out at 11 p.m. So there's no time frame where this could or could not happen. Pete goes to bed at some point, though, so it won't happen in the middle of the night. You guys can get some rest. I know there's a lot of anxious Boston College fans out there that are just dying to hear what's going to happen. So they both had their interviews, and I'm going to tell you right now that I believe everything that I've heard. I'm going to get into that in just a little bit. But let's look at the two candidates. So you have Bill O'Brien, who has been a longtime coach, who has had stops at the NFL on the college level. He's had a lot of success. He's worked with some of the best coaches in history. And you have Al Washington, who is a BC grad and is an up-and-coming coach, a defensive line coach, has worked at Michigan, Ohio State. So let's dive into what the differences are here, because there's quite the difference. Now, if you're going to look for a player's coach, that's Al Washington. If that's like something that is important to you, that's a good one. And the reason why Al Washington is so popular right now, like why he's getting final looks, is that former players are kind of, some of them are rallying behind him. Not all of them, because I've seen some say that, it either doesn't matter or they can understand why Bill O'Brien would be a good candidate, like Matt Ryan did today on Felger and Mass. So you got guys like Will Blackman. I saw John Johnson. Christian Mahogany, I think, tweeted something that I think was him in support. He used some emoji I've never seen. Look like a guy getting his head massaged. But I've heard there's a lot of young alumni in terms of football players that really like him. Now, there's also alumni that were around his year, too, that are nostalgic. They like him based off of nostalgia. I mean, let's just call it what it is, right? They remember when he was there. They liked seeing him. That's one piece. And I think it's valuable, because I think there were alumni that sat in on the interviews that pushed Al Washington to the front. The other piece, I feel, and let's call it what it is money. Al Washington is not a guy that matches what you've heard all along was a very key point for what BC's looking for their next head coach. I'm telling you from my sources very, very close to the situation that know what's going on, that Blake James, the AD, wants a coach with experience. That he wants someone who's done this before. Now, you look at Al Washington, not only has he not been a head coach, but he's a positional coach. He hasn't even been a coordinator yet. I mean, he's been special teams, but I don't think I count that. So he would be in effect jumping up 2 levels to become the next head coach. You just finished Jeff Halfley, a head coach that many people got very frustrated with, watching him figure things out every season and then not understand the mistakes he made because he had no experience. He'd only been a coordinator once. I have a hard time believing that Blake James doesn't see Al Washington and see some of those same concerns. You know, is he one of the best positional coaches in the country? I think he's very good, but BC is not at a space, and clearly based off of what they're looking for, they cannot afford to take a risk with a guy that is basically in the mold of Jeff Halfley. I question the players. I think it's nice that you're pushing for your former, you know, John Johnson worked with Al Washington when Al Washington was a positional coach, but I beg the question. A couple questions that came up when I was researching this. How much of these and like I get the NFL. I mean, alumni from Boston College in the NFL get some say in what they're doing. I mean, Matt Ryan was on the interview committee, from what I've heard, but like John Johnson made it sound like an ultimatum, basically. Like, if you don't hire Al Washington, I'm still going to stay out. So if Al Washington does come, like these football players that are all pounding their chest that they need this guy, how much are they gonna donate? How much are they gonna put into the NIL fund? How much are they gonna help this guy succeed? Because he's gonna come cheap, but I don't think BC will support him enough to make a cheap hire work. I think it's a lot of talk. That's all I think it is. And I really hope that Blake James listens to some of their feedback, but doesn't put a ton of weight in what former players say, because at the end of the day, when many of them leave, they may come back for some games and not, but at that point, they're just like every other person that's a BC fan, except they played for the team. So they don't deserve to derail a coaching search for a guy, honestly, that I don't feel is qualified to do what he needs to do. Like, take away your love of Al Washington. If I told you that Al Washington never went to Boston College, would you even consider him as a head coach? You would be furious right now. It's because he's a BC person. And again, I want to say that if this was 5 years from now and Al Washington went someplace and got to be a defensive coordinator, or he worked his way up to be a MAC head coach, I would absolutely love to see Al Washington back at BC. I just don't think it's the right time. Now, in our second segment, I want to get into the other candidate, Bill O'Brien, and talk a little bit about what I heard about him, where things stand, and kind of, what's the odds of him finally pulling in this job, one we've been waiting to hear about for quite a while. We'll get all into that in just a moment. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. I love buffalo wings, nachos. I hope I have enough time because I want to make some good stuff. What's the Super Bowl without good food, right? What's the Super Bowl without FanDuel? It has so many ways for you to end the Super Bowl with a W, a 2, or 3. You can make parlays. You can make bets. Go over under on specific stats. Do you think Brock Purdy's going to throw for a certain amount of touchdowns? You can think of it. They're there. I mean, the options are limited, especially for the Super Bowl. So new customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet at $5 or more wins. Just visit fanduel.com/locked on to sign up. That's fanduel.com/locked on. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. This is Locked On Boston College. I am your host, AJ Black. And we were just talking about Big Al. And again, love the guy. Would love to see him be on the staff. And whose staff should he be on? The other candidate, Bill O'Brien. I was on yesterday's Locked On ACC show with Kenton Gibbs, and I I think that this is probably the best hire BC can make, especially given the time. Now, one interesting nugget, I'll give it to you guys now. I put it up on my board earlier today that interestingly, when Jeff Hafley applied for this job in 2019, he wasn't their first choice at first. It was Bill O'Brien. Bill O'Brien was someone they were interested in, but he apparently wanted to stay at the NFL level at that time. Now he voiced interest very quickly in this job and has risen to the top. Now here's where I've talked about Bill O'Brien a lot, and if you've listened to this podcast, I think he's the best fit. I think he brings energy to a program that desperately needs it. He brings a level of expertise on an offense that would be great with Thomas Castellanos and the quarterbacks and anything you're going to bring here. He immediately becomes one of your biggest hire that you've ever made. There's so many good reasons why he is the guy that I feel would be the best fit for Boston College. Now, I think from what I've heard today, it sounds to me that BC, they have their system, their reasons for their hires. There's a reason why Kevin Stones, Rich Thompson's, and myself about a week, 4 days ago, were going, it's gonna be Bill O'Brien. And then all of a sudden it's like, nope, we're gonna do interviews and it's gonna take 4 more days. Here is what I believe has happened. I believe that Blake James knew all along that he wanted Bill O'Brien, that he wanted to hire, and Bill O'Brien knew that they wanted him and he wanted to be here. It was a back and forth type deal. And the Blake James, from his time at other schools, was just like, let's just hire him. But you guys all know how Boston College works, right? you get farther late, you get the system of what goes on here. And I'm not, it's not as bad as people make it out to be, but you have to do your interviews. You have to meet Father Leahy. You got to do all the different pieces that BC has in their hiring handbook or whatever they use. So that's why you had other interviews. And honestly, it's not the worst thing in the world. I know Father Leahy takes a lot of guff for this, but what happens if you negotiate terms with Bill O'Brien, things fall apart, and then you still haven't had a backup yet? Then what do you do? That's why I think these interviews, honestly, at times are a good thing. So they get through this process. Bill still blows them away. And then you're down to, you need to well, it sounds like it's going to happen. So I'm reading Bruce Feldman's tweet as we speak. Ohio State offensive coordinator Bill O'Brien has emerged as the top candidate for the Boston College coaching vacancy. So there you go. So shortly, Mitch and I are going to go live and talk more about this, but that sounds like it's about it. I told you I was going to go live with this stuff, and then all of a sudden it's going to happen, right? So it sounds like Bill has the job. So there you go. In the end, BC did not cheap out. They ended up putting the money down, and now we get to see how Bill O'Brien creates his staff. Now, I will go on in a minute, and we'll switch over. I got a few things I got to go do in a second, but we will talk in just a moment with Mitch Wolf about this hire. We'll get into why it means what it means and where it could take Boston College. We'll be back in just a moment. This is Locked On Boston College, AJ Black. And before we wrap things up, just want to remind you on Eagle Insider, this is the time to get in 70% off. It's actually 75% right now. Get in and get your deal right now at Eagle Insider. So when you are thinking about this hire, what this means for Boston College, this is about as big of a home run as Boston College could hit. Bill O'Brien is at a whole other stratosphere than Jeff Hafley, honestly. Jeff Hafley was a guy that you hoped grew into a job. Bill O'Brien has done it. He has been that guy. And when you hear that he has interest in a school like BC, this is a chance for Boston College to do something that they have never done before, which is finish off a splash hire and raise the profile of this program. And honestly, folks, it's coming at the perfect time. With NIL kicking up, with the conference realignment, BC needs to make a big statement here, and they're doing it. So I am very happy to hear that Boston College has made the right move and is on the road to hiring Bill O'Brien. So I know a lot of fans are very excited about this. I'm going to wrap this episode up a little quickly because I need to go and do some prep work for this live episode I'm about to do with Mitch, where we're going to talk about Bill O'Brien. So make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll be back in just a couple minutes for a second episode where we talk about Bill O'Brien as the new head coach of the Boston College Eagles.